It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
It is episode number 518. It is the trade deadline preview edition of Rico Brogna. In less than a week, on July 31st at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, we will get to the MLB trade deadline. What we will do today on the Rico is preview a lot of names, a lot of relievers, some starters, some bats that the Mets could potentially add, what the price tag is going to be on a lot of these guys, what we think David Stearns should do, what we think he will do. And I start by saying that my feeling is so different than last year. You know, last year I agreed with David Stearns' approach. I argued with Hoff in that I didn't want to go balls to the wall. Like, I liked the team. I believed in the team, but I wasn't ready to do those all-in moves, those, risky, this guy can be a future star. We're renting a player for a few months, but hey, we're close to a world championship kind of moves. And you could argue I was wrong because ultimately the Mets did get to the sixth game of the National League Championship Series. I don't think I was wrong because when I think back to where the Mets ended up, what was available at the trade deadline, the cost of those players, what were they really going to do, and what difference would it have made? You know what I mean? Like, Tanner Scott was a guy we were all attracted to last year because similar to this year, the Met bullpen was their clear need. That was the number one need as we sat here a year ago at this time. And Tanner Scott was the best piece available, and he was going to cost a lot. And I think back to the Mets-Brewers series, the Met-Phillies series, the Dodgers series. If they had made the trade, if they had dealt for Tanner Scott, would it have made a difference in terms of the postseason results? And the answer is probably not. I think thinking back to the way things ended in the six-game series loss to the LA Dodgers, there probably wasn't a move that they could have made that would have changed things. Now, maybe it would have kept Tanner Scott with the Mets. Maybe they would sign him as a free agent. By the way, Tanner just went on the injured list for the LA Dodgers. But I bring that up because we're going to bring up a lot of names today. There's going to be a lot of names talked about for a week. And then after the deadline passes, if the Mets don't make the move you wanted them to make, there's going to be a lot of hand-wringing. There's going to be a lot of they should have done this, they should have done that. The way I view the trade deadline and missed opportunities is if the guy was traded. Not they should have traded for a player and the player was never dealt. Like, to me, I can't get angry about that. So if we're talking about, we'll get into Dylan Cease a little bit later on, but if we're talking about Dylan Cease and you really want Dylan Cease and they don't trade for Dylan Cease and the Padres don't trade Dylan Cease at all, I'm not going to be angry about it. The only times I really ever get angry, frustrated is if there's a player I wanted. Tanner Scott was an example of that last year for us, or if it was for you, if they get traded elsewhere. And then we see the trade package. We see if the Mets could have matched it. We see if we were willing to make that kind of trade offer. So just to put it out there, I don't get angry about hypotheticals. I get angry about missed opportunities. So let's start with that. Now, what do the Mets need at the trade deadline? As we sit here and we record this on a Met off day, they are in first place. They're a half game up on the Philadelphia Phillies in the National League East. They are in a better playoff position this year than they were last year, which is probably why I'll be more aggressive as a fan. I'd be willing to be more aggressive as a fan. But I also still wrestle with the rentals. Like, I'm willing to rent a player, but Ronnie Mauricio, who I don't think is going to have a huge impact on this team over the final 2 months. I think there's a really good chance he ends up back in AAA, and Mauricio is a big part of the 26 team, but not the 25 team. I have a tough time trading Ronnie Mauricio for a rental. I have to be honest with you. So let's start with Dylan Cease. And we'll start with the starting pitchers. We'll get to the bullpen. We'll get to all the bats. We'll debate what we think they need the most. But Dylan Cease is one of the latest players that have been attached to the Mets. And it isn't new. During the offseason, even in spring training, there were thoughts about the Padres trading Cease before he got to free agency. And I like Dylan Cease. I am not worried about the numbers around him so far this season, which are not very good. But luckily, there are numbers that make you think his above 4 ERA is more bad luck than anything else. He's pitched to a 4.59 ERA. His strikeouts per 9 inning remain as good, actually better than what they were last year. His walks per 9 innings are basically around the same. His FIP, which basically tells you, hey, without bad luck, this would be his ERA, is 3.58, which is right around his average. But the appealing thing about Cease that you had during the offseason, and certainly you have now, is the reliability factor. He currently leads the league in starts. Last year, he led the league in starts. The year before that, he led the league in starts. The year before that, he didn't lead the league in starts, but he made 32 of them. He's made 30-plus starts in 4 consecutive years, and barring an injury this year, it's going to be 5 straight years. And there's no reason to believe that as Dylan Cease enters the final few months before free agency, that's going to change. Would Dylan Cease be a great addition to this rotation? Absolutely. Do I look at him as a bona fide ace? I do not. But he provides something that the Mets don't have a lot of right now, or at least haven't had a lot of this season, which is ability to go 6 or 7 innings and go deep into a game. If the Mets traded for Dylan Cease tomorrow and they plopped him in to the middle of this rotation, A, they could just go 6-man, or B, they've already improved their bullpen by moving Clay Holmes to the bullpen because Cease could literally just replace his spot. So I like Dylan Cease. I'm not worried about the numbers. I think he'd be fine here. I think he'd be a great addition. Here are my 2 issues with Dylan Cease. And you tell me if you disagree on this off. Number 1, I'm concerned about the cost. Like, if you're telling me the Mets could get him for 2 middling prospects, basically the package that the Mariners just gave up for Josh Naylor, where the Diamondbacks traded him for 2 kind of average prospects, fine. Like, I get you got to give up something. But Brandon Sproat is off limits. Jonah Tong is off limits. And even the young position players, because that would be the likeliest thing San Diego would want, because the Padres are not selling as if they're giving up. They would be selling for another need and then probably buying a starting pitcher elsewhere. I mean, if the season ended today, literally the Mets play the Padres in the playoffs, which is another factor. Like, if San Diego gets an equal offer from Dylan Cease and one is from an American League team and the other is the Mets, I don't think they're making a trade with the Mets. But I'm not in love with giving up Ronnie Mauricio. I'll be honest with you. I think Ronnie Mauricio's got star potential. Would Cease for Mauricio in the short term make the Mets better in 2025? Absolutely. Would he give the Mets a better championship right now and in this moment than whatever Mauricio is going to contribute the rest of the season? Yes. But I'm not as comfortable as I am going for a rental and being more aggressive than I was last year. I don't want to make that trade. And a part of why I don't want to make that trade is I think there is a 5% chance, that's how low it is, that the Mets would even entertain the idea of re-signing Dylan Cease. I think they're going to look at his age, which is not particularly old, but if you're going to sign him to a long-term contract, you're doing it as he turns 30. So you're talking about a 30-year-old pitcher who's going to want a 5 or 6 year deal, who's also thrown so many innings the last few years. We talk about that as a positive, but the negative is he going to fall apart? So if they trade for Dylan Cease, let's just get this straight, it's a rental. They're not keeping him. So I'm interested in him, Hoff. I'm just not interested in him in terms of giving up basically any of the young position players that are currently at the major league level. That's Beatty, that's Mauricio, that's Vientos, even to a degree Acuna. I'd be probably more willing to trade Luis Angel Acuna than the other 3 guys. And maybe I got to get over that, but I'm gun shy. I would do it for middling prospects. I would not do it for those kinds of impact players.
Yeah, for Dylan Cease in particular, I would not be trading Ronnie Mauricio. I don't think, and I 100% agree with you. I think he's the one guy that's up here right now that has potential star power. Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, they can play fine, but Mauricio's got star power written all over it. So I would not give up a piece like that for a rental player. And that's what Dylan Cease is. So I am not budging. I mean, if you want to tell me there's a different starting pitcher in the minors that we might have to swap, I'd be more willing to do that. I'm not sure if I'm going to do the Jonah Tong. I wouldn't do that.
No, like, and I'll give you like where I would go on it. I would go Blade
Brandon
Tidwell.
Waddell. Oh,
What was that? Brandon Waddell. Yeah. I'd go Blade. Here's a problem. I was going to say like a package of 2 prospects. I don't think that's what the Padres want, because I assume that because they're trying to win, they're going to want players who help them. But Jet Williams off the table, Jonah Tong off the table, Nolan McLean off the table, Carson Benj off the table, Brandon Sproat off the table. So I think you immediately take your top 5 prospects and say, no way. And I would say the same, even though they're not prospects anymore, to Mauricio, Beatty, Vientos. Acuna, would I trade Acuna and let's say, a middling prospect, Nate Dome, who's like their 16th rated prospect? Would I do that? Maybe, probably. I guess at that point I would. Even Acuna, who can be helpful. But think about it. Acuna's helpfulness right now in the short term is as a pinch runner off the bench. Like, he's not going to get significant at-bats. Now, can he be more than that next year or the year after? Sure. I don't feel Acuna's ever going to be a star. I think he could be a useful super utility player, maybe an everyday player at some point. I think that's the package I would make. Now, here's where I'd be willing to go further. Dylan Cease is a free agent at the end of the year. They're not going to re-sign him. Merrill Kelly is a free agent at the end of the year. Again, depending on the years he's going to ask for, likely they re-sign him. Same thing with Zach Allen. Like, I don't think those are guys that the Mets would trade for and then keep. Would they all be good additions to this rotation? Of course. Especially because of the ability to just move Clay Holmes to the bullpen or even just keep a 6-man rotation for the time being. The guys I'd be willing to trade more for are Mitch Keller, because he signed through 2028. And I think he could be available. Like, the thing about long-term contracts on pitchers is that there's no rush to trade them because they are signed through next season. There's obviously more of an urgency to trade a Gallen and a Kelly and a Cease because they're gone at the end of the season. But Mitch Keller, I would be willing to trade a little bit more for. He provides a similar reliability as Dylan Cease. He's got 5 years, $77 million left on his deal through 2028. Joe Ryan, who I'm skeptical the Twins are going to trade him. Joe Ryan is signed through the following year. I don't think he's eligible for free agency for 2 more years. He's pitched like a top of the rotation arm. I think the price tag on him is going to be very expensive. And Sandy Alcantara, who I've made clear I'm a fan of. Despite his struggles this season, I've seen enough guys and how long it takes to come back from Tommy John surgery. Sandy Alcantara would be another guy that, I'd be more willing to give up good young players for because I have them for multiple years. Luis Severino, I think, would be a nice addition to bring him back. But the Mets weren't willing to pay him what he ended up getting from the A's. Yusei Kikuchi, who, Kodai Senga would be thrilled. I don't know if you guys saw the video of Kodai Senga running over to Yusei Kikuchi to introduce himself or say hello. Maybe they know each other, but Senga looked like a fan running over to Yusei Kikuchi. And I used to not be a fan of Kikuchi, but he's pitched incredibly well. I'm skeptical that the Angels are going to trade him because they have him signed through next year and the year after, and they're sort of in a pennant race. And then the other starting pitcher that I would move a lot for is Mackenzie Gore, who you hear the Nationals are open to dealing. I would be skeptical that the Nationals would trade him inside the division. Mike Rizzo certainly had an aversion to doing that. He's not there anymore. But I think any of those guys, and those are I don't want to call them top tier guys, but those are the better starting pitchers that can be on the market. There is a list of lower tier guys. And one of the guys I have to bring up to you, and it's going to be funny to say, but you can't deny how well he's pitched. And you can't deny that the general manager or team president, David Stearns, probably likes him. But what if I told you there's a guy out there who's made 10 starts and has pitched to a 1.89 ERA? He's 32 years old. He makes no money. Would you want a guy like that?
I love a guy like that.
His name is Adrian Hauser. Would you want to bring Adrian Hauser back for pitching depth?
Why do you do that to me? That's just so messed up. I walk into that.
Because he's got a 1.89 ERA. He's been amazing.
What do we have to give up? What prospect do we have to give up to get that stud?
I don't think a lot. Despite how well he's pitched this season, I don't think Chicago should trade him. They should cash out immediately on what he's done. I just can't imagine they're getting a lot But these are my lower tier arms. These are depth arms that the Mets could go after. I don't think any of them make postseason starts, but they're guys to protect yourself from another injury to Kodai Senga or a setback for Sean Manaea or any other injury you just don't see coming. Charlie Morton, Zach Eflin, Herman Marquez, Edward Cabrera, who probably is a little bit higher than that. Those are some of the names. Now, I don't think starting pitching needs to be a priority. I think if you could add multiple bullpen arms, I think that's fine. I also am so encouraged by these young guys in the minor leagues. I mean, every time I look up, Jonah Tong is dominating. Nolan McLean pitched into the 8th inning on Thursday's game. What minor leaguer pitches into the 8th inning of games? So they've got specifically McLean and Sproat, because I don't think they're going to call Tong up. They got 2 starting pitchers at AAA on the come. 2 guys they could call up at any point. So I almost feel they're kind of good when it comes to starting pitching. And we talked about this on the last Rico. David Stearns opened up the possibility that some of those arms could possibly be moved to the bullpen, that they could actually use them as short relievers in case they can't get one. But I look at, Joe Ryan, Sandy Alcantara, Mackenzie Gore. They're on another level of, if I'm acquiring them, it's not merely to help me in 2025, it's to move forward. But they also don't necessarily need to do that. Because unlike a few years ago, Kodai Senga is signed through next year. Sean Manaea is signed for next year. David Peterson has 1 more year before free agency. So the top 3 guys in the rotation are signed. Frankie Montas is signed. Clay Holmes is signed. And then you throw in all the young players that you expect to add to the rotation next year. As much as I like Sandy Alcantara, they don't need to add more guys for the future, because the guys that they're running out, unlike last year and unlike the year before, they're actually signed through the next couple of years. So there doesn't need to be an urgency to add a starter. Long story short, if there's a good deal out there to be made, fine. I don't think there needs to be an urgency to add a starting pitcher.
See, that's where I totally disagree. I actually think that the most impact will come once a starter pitcher is added.
Because of Clay? Is this directly at Holmes moving to the bullpen? Or unrelated? That's a huge piece of it. Okay. Because
think about it. You add a starting pitcher, especially a top-end starting pitcher that's going to get innings in the postseason, and now you've created that 7 innings or 6 to 7 innings of that you don't have to worry about anymore, and you've cut down it to 3 to 4 innings tops in a game, where you have Edwin Diaz, Clay Holmes is there, Brooks Raley, and maybe Reed Garrett. If you don't add another relief pitcher, those are your guys. I'd feel much more confident with that in a playoff game.
Yeah, I think that the appeal of trading for a starting pitcher and saying, hey, we just added a reliever named Clay Holmes, I totally get that. My argument against the need for a starting pitcher is that they've got depth right now. They've got a 5-man rotation. I'm not talking up Paul Blackburn, but he is a depth guy. And you've got 2 pitching prospects in Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat, who already should be here. They should have made starts here weeks ago. So I think they're equipped, even in the short term, if there is an injury or 2. And I think they're equipped long term. I don't think, as much as I like Sandy Alcantara, and I don't believe that this season's failures are what's going to be next year, I think he has a chance to regain his form. I keep thinking of Zach Wheeler. I mean, Zach had a tough time coming back from Tommy John surgery, and look at him now. Sometimes you need to be patient with guys coming off of Tommy John. But I think if the appeal is simply moving Clay to the bullpen, there are a lot of bullpen arms that are going to be available. Now, the risk with bullpen arms, once you get past the top guys, the Emmanuel Clases, the Felix Batistas, the Johan Durans. By the way, I do not include David Bednar in that. David Bednar is a reliever I'd be interested in, but I do not put him on the level of sure thing, top line reliever. Because think about the career David Bednar's had over the last couple of years. He's had some, didn't he end up in the minor leagues a couple of years ago?
He was in the minor leagues this year.
Was it this year he was there? I mean, he's having a great year this year.
They sent him down because his ERA was higher than Devin Williams to start the season. It was awful, and they sent him down. He came back up. I think it took a little bit to get get the closing spot back, but now he's been on fire. So
I know last year he was abysmal. Like 2 years
Yeah.
ago, he was awful. And this was one of those guys we talked about at the 2022 trade deadline. You go all the way back to when we wanted the Mets to add a reliever in 2022. And David Bednar, who was an all-star that year, 27 years old, looking good. Like we all wanted him then. He had another good year, had a horrible year last year. You mentioned his struggles earlier this year. Like I'd trade for him. I'm not against trading for David Bednar, but I cannot put him on the level of a Clase or a Duran or a Felix Bautista. But you got guys like that out there. You mentioned Dennis Santana, who's pitched great, former Met, former Yankee. He's had a great year in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of Jimmy Harrigan, who's had a great year in Colorado. The relievers in Minnesota. They've got so many, whether it's Griffin Jacks or the lefty, Danny Akume, however you pronounce it, the former Oriole. There are a lot of relievers. And so if the appeal of a starter is simply moving Holmes to the bullpen, you could just go add a reliever. Like you don't have to go that route where the expense on adding a starting pitcher is so high to then just move Clay Holmes to the bullpen. And there are circumstances that could get Clay Holmes to the bullpen anyway. If Frankie Montas pitches his ass off, if they give a Brandon Sproat an opportunity, like we may be sitting here in mid-late September saying, wow, Clay had a good year in the rotation, but I'm just looking at the playoff rotation. He makes the most sense going to the bullpen. That may happen anyway without overspending, for Dylan Cease.
Well, listen, again, I don't really want to overspend for Cease, but again, you're talking about Montas having an amazing, second half of the season, which would be awesome for everybody. But do you realistically at this moment in time think that Frankie Montas is pitching real innings in a playoff?
I don't know, but I do want to tell you something that I can't wait till it happens. We're going to do a whole Rico about it. But in the next few weeks, they're going to come out with the playoff schedule, right? They do that sometime in August. And based on last year, do you guys remember the American League Divisional Series at all? I know it wasn't our focus, but if you guys remember like the Yankee Royals series, the way they laid it out was game, off day, game, off day, game, off day, game. And if that is the case for the National League this season, the Mets are only going to need a 3-man rotation for the divisional series. So when you ask me, hey, is Frankie Montas going to make a playoff start? Well, it matters. I mean, how many starters are they going to need in the series, assuming they're in the playoffs? And oh, by the way, and we had an emailer bring this up months ago, can Kodai Senga pitch on 4 days rest? Like, is that even going to be a possibility come postseason time? Let's do a little bit more on the relievers. So there are a bunch of teams that I know are selling, or at least should be selling based on where they are in the standings. The Colorado Rockies are obviously, I think, the most obvious team with a record of, 50 games under 500. What's funny about Colorado is I mentioned Jimmy Harrigan, who's had a pretty good year. Jake Bird, who I thought was impressive when the Mets saw him when they played the Rockies earlier this season. Both of those guys, Victor Vodnik too. Like they've got 3 relievers where they may not be household names. They're all upgrades over Alex Carrillo. So I think any of those 3 relief pitchers would be decent upgrades. Now the Diamondbacks, I think, are showing us that they're going to sell. They are sitting a couple of games under 500. They've already went out and traded Josh Naylor, who you look at his numbers this year, was having a pretty good year playing first base for Arizona. So I think that's an indicator that they're going to go full sell. Their bullpen is very unimpressive in terms of guys having good years. Shelby Miller was having a good year, but he's hurt. Jalen Beeks, I think, would be an intriguing addition because it gives him another lefty. I love what Brooks Raley has done so far. You could never have enough left-handers. But outside of that, Ryan Thompson, the side-arming right-hander, I guess would be a guy to look at and would be interesting. We mentioned the Pittsburgh Pirates, another team that in all likelihood is going to sell. David Bednar, if they decide to move him, which they've always seemed to have an aversion to. Dennis Santana's had a great year, which I still would never trust Dennis Santana, but I can't deny the numbers he's put up. Caleb Ferguson, a left-hander, remember him, the former Yankee, the former Dodger, could be a good addition. I bring these names up because these are the teams that are like guaranteed to sell. Then you got the Cardinals, who should sell. And I think all year long, probably Cardinal fans have been sitting there waiting, thinking, hey, things are going to fall apart. The guy in St. Louis who's most appealing is Ryan Helsley. We talked about him during the offseason as a candidate, as the guy that could be moved. But they also have a few other lefties. Jojo Romero's had a great year. I was looking to pick him up in fantasy the other day. I'd have a tough time going after Steven Matz just because it's Steven Matz. it's like your version of Adrian Hauser. Except Adrian Hauser's pitched to a 1.4 ERA. The Cardinals also DFA'd Eric Fetty the other day, who a year ago was a guy the Cardinals probably should have traded at the deadline. He was an appealing guy. The Athletics are another team that should absolutely trade people away. Mason Miller, who was so hot, like people loved Mason Miller a year ago because he threw 1,000,000 miles per hour, has not had a great year. He still strikes a ton of people out. I think some of his numbers show that he's been a little unlucky, like his FIP is 2.87 compared to a 4 ERA. But the A's have a couple of guys, Tyler Ferguson, Mitch Spence, Hogan Harris, like a few guys that you could go after. And I think what's appealing about most of those guys is they're not going to cost you a lot. Minnesota is where I think the relievers are going to cost you a lot because I do think the Twins are going to sell. I don't know if Johan Duran's available, but if he is, I think he's the guy where you have to consider giving up a massive package for. Griffin Jax has had a very up and down season. Griffin Jax is another one of those guys. When you look at his ERA, it's concerning. But if you dive deeper into his performance, he's had a pretty good year. Danny Kume, the left-hander, has had a ridiculously good season. And I mentioned before, I'd love to add another lefty to the bullpen. The Twins are the kind of team where if you're the Mets or the Yankees or really anybody, you make a big deal with them, you can end up with 3 players that help your team because they've got 3 relievers to 4 relievers you'd like to trade for. They've got Joe Ryan at the top of the rotation, we talked about earlier. And then even offensively, I don't think they're going to trade Byron Buxton. I would take the risk on trading for Byron Buxton. I don't think they are. Harrison Bader, which we'll get into in a minute, obviously could help this team defensively. I know you're happy about that, Pete. Yes. And then even Willie Castro. Willie Castro is a decent offensive player. He's got incredible versatility. Could play the outfield, could play shortstop, could play second base. He's a switch hitter. But let me get to Bader. Here's what I'm trying to figure out, Hoff, with Harrison Bader, who I know is your guy. Yeah. He's had a good offensive year. Let me give you guys the numbers in case you haven't been paying attention. It's been a good year for Bader. 251, 765 OPS, 12 home runs, 38 RBIs. I mean, compare that to Tyrone Taylor, and that's all you need to know. If they bring Bader back, and we know how good defensively he can be, when and how often does he play? That would be my question to you, because I know you love this guy. I love his defense. I think he could certainly help them late in games, but would you start him every day? Would you start him half the time? How would you handle a Harrison Bader if the Mets brought him back?
It's tough because I think this year he's earning a regular spot. He doesn't have to play center field, which is a good thing. He could play left field. I mean, obviously you have Tyrone Taylor already, who's proven he could play a good center field. It all depends on, I guess when it comes to playoffs, it's a different story. But right now, regular season wise, it's all about who's on the mound that day and how you're going to, stack the lineup. If it's a lefty pitcher, you're going to stack righties and maybe Nimmo takes a seat. You know what I mean? Or goes to the DH. But you're going to find time. This is a easy conversation because you're going to find ways to put Bader in the lineup that he's going to play 4 to 5 games a week. He's not going to play every day, but you're going to still give him 4 or 5 games a week, no doubt.
So Tyrone Taylor basically becomes useless under this plan? Would Bader basically become Taylor? Because we went over this the other day. Taylor still plays a lot. Despite as comfortable as we're all becoming with Jeff McNeil in center field, Jeff McNeil doesn't play center field every day.
Well, here's the thing, right? Tyrone Taylor, we love his defense. We love his moxie. We hate his freaking offensive stats. And right now, there's no other center fielder or outfielder that you're going to get that's going to come into New York and put up better numbers than what Bader has, which is shocking.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a better year than Cedric Mullins.
Yeah.
He just has. He
can play the position. Here's the biggest knock on Harrison Bader, and I will never debate this. He gets hurt too much. So that's why you need Taylor. You maybe for the time being, you just ride out as Bader as long as possible. And if he gets hurt, then you go back to Taylor.
Yeah. So obviously we're incorporating center field in this discussion. Harrison Bader is a guy that's available or could be available. Look, the Twins are just loaded with guys that can help teams. I mean, they are the ultimate sell team in a lot of ways. I think the Diamondbacks get a lot of attention, but when you look at top of the rotation arm, Joe Ryan, when you look at 3 or 4 really good bullpen arms, Minnesota has a center fielder, at least for us, and Harrison Bader. And if Minnesota really wants to get crazy, they could trade Carlos Correa. They could trade Byron Buxton. They could trade Royce Lewis. Like, they could go further with this if they truly want. Now, speaking of center fielders, JR in Somerville, who I appreciate. I like JR when he calls up the show. Here's his wish list. Robert Garcia of Texas, and his long shot is Adolis Garcia. He brought this up to me recently. Adolis Garcia for center field bat, and don't say he can't play center field when he's about to win a Gold Glove in right field again. Hours after saying the Martian can play center field, he's got his head up in his ass in the outfield. Well, hold on. Let me clarify.
What?
I talked a little bit on Evan and Tiki about how the Mets have a surplus of guys that are third basemen, guys that can play second base, like guys that would help the Yankees. And the Yankees have a surplus of outfielders. So I tried to figure out, are there Met-Yankee trades, if they ever would agree to it, that work, that makes sense, where both fan bases would say yes. And so we were talking about Jason Dominguez and if the Yankees would ever be willing to move him, especially for a guy like Ronnie Mauricio, who I think is similar. Switch hitters, had their careers derailed by injuries, both have star potential. You know, they're similar. Both can't hit right-handed. They both have a lot of things going on. And I mentioned Dominguez as a center fielder, and he is. Now, he's played a terrible left field. I don't think if Jason Dominguez is playing center field for the Mets or for the New York Yankees, he's going to be a Gold Glover, but he is a center fielder. Would I take him out late for defense? Absolutely. Adolis Garcia, I mean, I haven't seen the guy play center field. I was looking up his history to see, okay, has Adolis Garcia played center field? And the answer is years ago, he's done it. He is a Gold Glove right fielder. So logic would tell you, hey, if you're a Gold Glove right fielder, wouldn't you be capable of going out and playing a decent center field? I'm not even going to debate that because I don't know. Like, is he better than Jeff McNeil? Probably. I mean, Jeff's done a really good job in center field, but he's not a center fielder. So I'm not even poo-pooing the Adolis Garcia center field thing. I'm just really concerned about what the hell's happened to him offensively. I mean, the guy was a World Series hero. He hit nearly 40 home runs a few years ago. And then last year and even this year has sort of dropped off the cliff. Like, he's hitting 228. He's got a sub 700 OPS. He's had 14 home runs, driven in 57 runs, which are those numbers are good and certainly better than what they have. But I'm just concerned about his fall off over the last 2 years. Is he an upgrade over what they have now? And that's the litmus test we have to have. David Stearns even said that. Yeah, I think he probably is. So from that standpoint, he's an upgrade. From that standpoint, I'd be listening on it, but I am concerned about the drop off that he's had. That's kind of what I'm looking at there with Adolis Garcia. But interesting name, if Texas is willing to sell. They've also been one of those teams kind of in the middle on if they're willing to sell or not.
I have a question because I'm confused right now. Like, what are the Mets really looking for? Like, what there's obviously the litmus test of the players that, you know, we are on the roster right now. But we look at Starling Marte, you know, who's back. Jesse Winker's on the IL again. He's hopefully going to come back. Are we trying to get someone that's going to surpass those guys? Or are we just trying to get someone better than the roster right now? Like, who are we comparing it to?
So let's stick, obviously, with the offense. We all know they need bullpen help. They could use 2 or 3 bullpen arms, however they get it, whether it's high end, lottery ticket end, getting a starter, moving homes to the bullpen. That part's obvious. The offense is complicated because right now they haven't scored enough runs. And David Stearns made that clear last week. Nobody could deny that. They have not scored enough runs. So do they need outside bats to make this team better? And if the answer is yes, where is the improvement? We know the catching spot is Alvarez and Torrens. I doubt they're doing anything crazy behind the plate. We know Pete's the first baseman. Second base is kind of fluid because some days it is Jeff McNeil, who, when he's played this season, has been a productive player. I mean, he's got an 800 OPS. He's been a good player. Like, Jeff McNeil may not be batting title McNeil, but he's good Jeff McNeil, and he's had some clutch hits. Or it's Brett Beatty. And I'm kind of now back into the class or back into the mode of Beatty's had a decent year. He's been very streaky. I mean, he got sent down. We all couldn't stand him. But when you look at his performance and you look at his defense lately, not that he's untouchable, because I'm certainly not saying that. I'd be open to dealing him in the right trade. But Brett Beatty has earned playing time. Is he the second baseman? I don't know. But then when we get to third base, he may be the third baseman. The shortstop is obviously Lindor. We know about Nimmo in left, Soto in right. That leaves you with center field, DH, third base, and second base, in which you've got McNeil, Vientos, Beatty, Tyrone Taylor, Starling Marte, Jesse Winker, all battling for spots. Is there a bat out there? And this is why I've stressed it can be a second baseman. It could be a third baseman because of the versatility this team has, even if it means McNeil's playing a lot of center field. Or it could be DH. Is there a bat out there that significantly improves that group? And there aren't many. Like, I think Eugenio Suarez is. You know, I don't know how linked the Mets are to Suarez, but let me make this clear. If the Mets traded for Suarez, I don't think he's the third baseman. I think he's the DH.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's not get nuts about his defense, because once he's here, you're playing the best defensive team amongst the guys that you want to get the bat in. Well, Brett Beatty's going to play. Brett Beatty's earned playing time. And since Suarez is another right-handed slugger like Vientos, if anything, it leans more towards Brett Beatty. I mean, who knows? Vientos could be in that trade. But if they went out and got Suarez, would this lineup be better? Absolutely. Is there a way to play him? Absolutely. He's the designated hitter. And yeah, I guess he can play third base too. If that means Beatty's at second, McNeil's in center, Suarez is at third. I mean, that's a pretty good lineup. So I'm up for being intrigued by Suarez. I don't know what the price tag is going to be, but I think that's the bar. So any bat we get to, ask yourself, okay, how do they play? And are they better than what they currently have? And so that's my answer on a bat, which is why I'd be interested in a bat. Is David Stearns agreeing with that assessment? Doesn't sound like it. We had that David Stearns, Rico Brogna a few episodes ago. It didn't sound like he wanted to be aggressive for a bat, but I would certainly be open-minded to adding a bat that can improve this lineup, and certainly Suarez would do that.
You talked about Vientos maybe being part of a deal. You talk about maybe Brett Beatty if the right deal comes around, like depends on who the person is. But what about like McNeil? Is McNeil now someone who needs to be on this roster, or is he debatable to being a trade piece as well?
So I want to walk you through the thing I threw at Yankee fans today when I was on the radio on Evan and Tiki. I said the Mets and the Yankees match up for a trade, even though they'll never make a trade together. Like, unless David Stearns and Brian Cashman don't care about the histories of the Mets and the Yankees basically never wanting to make a trade together. And I was going through a lot of them.
Are you saying they're going to go for a picnic? They're going to have a picnic together?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, big class picnic. They can play hacky sack, too. It's going to be a fun time. But I thought of the Yankees' needs and the Mets' needs and said, is there something that matches up? And I had one that I think the Yankees should make. And then I had one that I know I'd make, and I'm curious if you would. Jeff McNeil to the New York Yankees. He would then be their second baseman. They could move Jazz back to third. Maybe not ideal, but hey, it's a major leaguer. And we get Trent Grisham, who for the majority of his career has been a fourth outfielder, but he's having a really good year. He's a tremendous defensive center fielder. It just fits better. Like, Grisham's numbers are similar to McNeil's. He's obviously hit a bunch more home runs. He was healthier earlier this season. But overall, like, they both have had pretty good productive seasons. The difference is Grisham is a center fielder. McNeil's on the infield. I said I'd make that trade. And some of my fellow Met fans think I'm nuts. And I'm like, why am I nuts? Like, it's a one-year thing. McNeil's probably not going to be on this roster next year anyway. We've talked about trading this guy for years. And you actually rid yourself 1 year early of his contract. Grisham's a free agent at the end of the year. I think it makes the Mets better. What say you?
I mean, Grisham's that type of dude that reminds me of Jesse Winker. Like, you hate when he's facing you, but you like when he's on your team. He's that guy who's a little bit fiery. Again, last year he was so down because you just didn't have a consistency. There was no role for him because when you had Judge and Soto on the same team, there was legitimately zero opportunity for him to play. So now, like you said, he's playing, he's performing. They need help at center field because Dominguez can't freaking catch a fly ball. That being said, I'm 100% doing that deal because we've already seen the surplus of infielders the Mets have. They don't have outfielders. That's exactly what you need. It's an upgrade.
And a trade like that, we have to be more open-minded to because this trade deadline needs to be pushed back. And I think it will be. I think that by the time the new CBA is written in a couple of years, the new trade deadline will be August 15th because there's too many teams that don't know what they should do. The Kansas City Royals, do they know what to do right now? The American League, the bottom of it stinks. You give it a few more weeks, you'll have more sellers. So I think that there may be teams, contending teams, who say, hey, we just match up well on a trade. You have this, we need that. Let's find a way to meet in the middle. Junior's got some trade ideas. He's got 3 of them. He writes, Evan and Pete, big fan of the show. I have 3 trades. Let me know what you think. Number 1. Drew Gilbert, Jeremy Rodriguez, and Ronald Hernandez for Mackenzie Gore. Not enough. I would love Mackenzie Gore. I think it is going to cost top line prospects. You're going to have to mention Sproat. You're going to have to mention McLean. You're going to have to mention Jet Williams. The Nationals are going to want to ransom, and I think even more so because we're in the same division. Number 2, Kevin Parada for Luis Robert Jr. I'm glad you brought up Luis Robert Jr. This is a guy I've talked a lot about. He's had a weird year. He's not had a good year. So if you look at his numbers right now, you would say, why do you want this guy? But he's been better lately. He is starting to produce lately. He's a guy who I think in a better situation, and this is a better situation, I think would succeed. I think he's got a chance to be the guy he was 3 years ago. Hit 35 home runs, steal 30 bases. Be a productive player. Be a good defensive player. This guy won a Gold Glove early in his career. I'm open to Luis Robert Jr. I also think if the Mets trade for him, and I don't think Parada is necessarily going to be enough, but if you trade for him and he doesn't hit this year, you don't have to play him. He could turn into Jeff McNeil still playing a lot of center field. I think Luis Robert Jr. is the long play. It's the play not just for the rest of this season in which you think the situation may change him, but also the year after. I do have another similar one I want to get to, but before that, Junior's last trade idea was Jet Williams, Ryan Clifford, and Jesus Baez for Emmanuel Clase. I think that's probably the most accurate one you put out there. It's a lot to give up, but Clase is elite. And I think that the price tag on Clase is going to have to be very, very high. And I remind my fellow Met fans, I know during the offseason we'll have some fun Ricos debating greatest trades in Met history, stuff like that. One of the greatest trades in Met history is the Edwin Diaz trade. And they gave up Jared Kelenic, and we didn't like it. So as much as giving up Jet Williams and giving up Ryan Clifford may sting, hey, if Emmanuel Clase is a dominant closer for the next half a decade, it'll be well worth it. With that said, I'm a hypocrite. It's too much for me. It's too much to give up. I think I'd give up one prized prospect. I don't know if I'm giving up. And obviously, Jet is the prized prospect. But Clifford and Baez aren't bad. It just feels like it's too much. Now, the other guy I want to jump to and pick everybody's brain on your interest level is Oneil Cruz. That's right. The Pittsburgh Pirates are flirting with the idea of dealing Oneil Cruz, who is under team control through 2029. So you got a lot of time with him. He's 26 years old, about to turn 27 years old. His numbers this year they're frustrating. He's only hitting .216. He does lead the league in stolen bases. He's at 16 home runs. We see the potential. We saw that when the Pittsburgh Pirates were sweeping the Mets a month ago. He's got this beautiful long left-handed swing. And remember, the Pittsburgh Pirates have converted Oneil Cruz from shortstop to center field. There are some highlights we've seen of Oneil Cruz not trying, not paying attention, being a little lazy. And what I would say about that, bring him into this room. Bring him under the tutelage of Captain Francisco Lindor. Bring him under the tutelage of Carlos Mendoza. I know Juan Soto doesn't hustle all the time, but bring him under the tutelage of Juan Soto. I think Oneil Cruz would grow up real quick. And I think that sometimes the situation you're in leads you to the way you act. So I don't know what the tag on Cruz would be or how much they'd have to give up, but I am very intrigued by pursuing Oneil Cruz and saying, you know what? You're our center fielder. And obviously late in games, you make sure you clean that up with Tyrone Taylor the way they've been doing it with Jeff McNeil, but he's already starting to learn the position. I'd be making that phone call. I'd be all over that. What's your opinion on making a pursuit of Oneil Cruz?
So if you told me, how about this? If you swapped it and said Ellie De La Cruz, I know he's a shortstop, so I get it. Then I'd say all in. Oneil Cruz, I got to be honest with you, I don't trust it, man. I hate those guys that do that are, product of their environment. He's not hustling. He doesn't care. The team doesn't care. I get it. But, you still got to play ball. And something about him is off. Like we saw, and this has been him since he's come up. The ball flies off his bat. How many records has he set? I think he's got the highest velocity off the bat. I think he's got all the records. I think he's got top 3 of the top 5. But regardless, and you saw him in the home run derby, amazing. He's got power, but something about him seems off. I like the flexibility. Would I be giving up a Jet Williams for him? Would you be giving up? I mean, you'd kind of have to, because you're basically saying that's the guy of the future, right?
I don't know if it would be Jet Williams. I don't know what the Pirates would ask for. The Pirates are such an ass-backwards organization. I'm not even sure what it would be. I mean, you could argue maybe it's more major league ready guys. Maybe it's Mark Vientos. Maybe Brian Hayes has had a great defensive year, but he doesn't hit. So maybe it's Brett Beatty. Would you be intrigued on one of those kinds of swaps or not really?
Yeah, obviously the Beatty I'd be more interested in, because again, you're talking about a position of need. We have a surplus over at third base. I'm willing to then think about it. Cruz has the power, and he's got the speed and the agility and the ability. He just doesn't have the mindset for it right now. Guess you could change that. You definitely can. But I will say this is the one criticism I have of Juan Soto. Guy is a workhorse. Guy puts in the work himself. I don't know how much of a leader he is, though, for the younger kids.
No, but sometimes being a leader is having people just follow you. That work ethic may be enough. That's what I'm saying with Oneil Cruz. You put him in a room in which Juan Soto outworks everybody. See, here's the thing about Soto. He doesn't hustle all the time, so maybe we notice that. But he also outworks everybody. He's one of the hardest workers in baseball. And Oneil Cruz being in that room and seeing that may cause him to have to follow suit. I think it's worth exploring. I don't think the Pirates are actually going to do it, though. And look, here's the reality. My prediction is relievers. I think that's all the Mets are going to do. Now, would we be okay with that? And obviously, the content matters. Which reliever is it? Are they trading for Seranthony Dominguez? Are they trading for Felix Bautista? Are they trading for Emmanuel Clase? We've gone through a million reliever names, and there are a ton. There are tons of guys on all different levels that they could get. But if they added 2 or 3 relievers, would that be enough? If they don't add a starter and they don't add a bat, can you see yourself being happy with what David Stearns did at the trade deadline?
No, I don't think so. If it's just 3 relievers, I don't think so. Let me rewind. Maybe if it's an Emmanuel Clase or Duran that you put at the back end,
right?
I may get a little excited about that. That could be very sexy.
That's not going to happen though. You're bringing that up, but they're not. I'd be very surprised. I know we talk about the name. They're not getting Emmanuel Clase or Johan Duran. That's not happening.
But then if you're saying you're getting 2 extra arms at the back end to what kind of go through the process of maybe we're going to DFA them by August 31st because they're not as good as we thought they were going to be, and they're getting to the rotation of the DFAs. I'm not for that. I need someone that is actually going to make an impact in the playoffs, not just to get us to the playoffs,
But what last year showed us, July 26th, the Mets acquired Ryan Stanek. He had a 5 ERA at the time with the Astros. Like, it wasn't good. It was a lottery ticket. Ryan Stanek turned out to be, at least in the postseason, their second best reliever. So when you say, hey, I need impact in the playoffs, we obviously all agree with you, but relievers are so fickle. They truly are. And it goes both ways. Like, I think I'll go back a million years when they traded for Billy Taylor of the A's. And he sucked. Like, he was terrible. So sometimes it goes both ways. You bring in the established relief pitcher, and the guy's awful. That's why I want them to add bullpen arms. Okay, and I'll have an opinion on who they add, that's for sure. But I love the idea of not having to give up a lot. That's why I wanted David Robertson. That's what I was drawn in by. Like, oh my God, they don't have to give up anything other than paying the tax. Well, anybody they acquire, they're going to have to pay a tax on. Like, the odds are they're going to have to bring in money. How about if it's Griffin, Jackson, Kume in Minnesota? Like, they swap a deal with the Twins. They had 2 relievers, and it's Jax and Kume. Would that excite? Would you be like, oh, okay? Well, I would. That'd be big improvement for this bullpen, at least on paper.
100%, because look at the level that they're pitching to this year. I mean, they're phenomenal. They're top end bullpen arms. My biggest gripe is this, though, and again, we have no idea how this trade deadline is gonna shake out. Right now, Josh Naylor moved. That's awesome. If high level bats arms get traded and the Mets are going dumpster diving, it's gonna piss the shit out of me.
Yeah, I don't think that high-level guys are being traded, though. I mean, think about it. We've gone through a lot of these names. I think a lot of the names we talked about today are not being traded, but I do want to do something for you. And it wasn't by me. It was by loyal listener Dan, who does a great job supplying information. He supplied us with the history of David Stern's trade deadlines. And we don't mean last year, because we all remember last year. That was his first trade deadline as Met team president. But would you like to hear some of the things he did in Milwaukee?
I would love to hear it.
All right. Now, keep in mind, he doesn't have the checkbook of Steve Cohen. But in the 2022 trade deadline, the Brewers acquired Matt Bush from the Texas Rangers. The Brewers acquired Trevor Rosenthal from the Giants. So 2 trades at the deadline, both relievers. We go back to 2021. They acquired John Curtis from the Marlins. John Curtis, who would go on and pitch for the Mets. He would acquire Daniel Norris, left-handed reliever from the Tigers, and he would acquire Eduardo Escobar, future Met, from the Diamondbacks for Cooper Hummel and Alberto Ciprian. So again, 2 of the 3 trades were for relievers, sort of dumpster diving relievers in John Curtis and Daniel Norris. 2020, no acquisitions. They just sold. They sold off David Phelps. In 2019, he acquired Drew Pomeranz from the Giants, Jake Faria from the Rays, another reliever, and Jordan Lyles from the Pirates. You're starting to see a trend. He really does acquire relievers. Like, that's his thing. 2018. Okay, we got some big ones here. Gio Gonzalez from the Nationals, so starting pitcher. Curtis Granderson from the Toronto Blue Jays. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
Jonathan Scope from the Baltimore Orioles, infielder. Joakim Soria from the Chicago White Sox, very aggressive that year. And Brad Miller, the infielder from Tampa Bay. In 2017, he acquired 2 relievers, Anthony Swarzak, Jeremy Jeffress from the Texas Rangers, and he actually made a trade with the Mets, acquired Neil Walker from the Mets when the Mets were selling. And in 2016, he acquired Phil Bickford. So the track record of David Stearns, heavy on relievers. And that's okay. Like, if they had 3 solid relievers, I'd be all right, because I don't think the center fielder or the bat options that I would want or you would want, I don't think they're going to be traded. It's not like Byron Buxton's going to get traded to the Phillies. Save that audio just in case it happens. But like, that would bother me. Like, I'm with you. If Byron Buxton got traded, I'd say, hey, where are we? Suarez, a little bit. As I mentioned, I think he could fit on this team as the DH or a third baseman, and then just McNeil's playing more center field. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of impact bats that are going to make us say, hey, what about us? And that's my rule. Now, you may not agree with that rule and say, well, we could have just blown them away and got this guy anyway. I only get annoyed when I see players traded and then I look at it and say, hey, how come we didn't beat that? How come we didn't get that guy?
Right. Well, you started the podcast very specific. This is a year where you feel that maybe you go for it. Maybe you do go and make that big splash. And I mean, I keep on hearing names that again.
But with who? Like, before you continue, yes, with the right guy. Right. With the right guy. And we've gone through this. We've gone through a million names on this podcast today. Who are the guys that make you say, got to go all in? I need that guy.
See, I don't know how true this is, but I thought I saw a rumor today that Brent Rooker was available.
He's not. Brent Rooker came out and said the A's told him he's not going to be traded.
Well, that sucks. All right, there goes that rumor.
But that's my point. Like, Cespedes was a decade ago. Maybe one of the most famous July 31st trades in the history of the Mets. We've had some big June 15ths, but for July 31st, Yoenis is up there. There isn't that out there. And so when we get angry and say, I want a bat, I want this, they need that, they need this, I don't think the dreams are out there. What's are relievers? And I want David Stearns to improve this bullpen. And I go eyes wide open. I know that bullpens are flaky. I know that bullpens are fluky. I know that you could acquire a guy who has a 180 ERA and he's going to come here and just suck. Just like the opposite happens. Just like we saw last year with, Ryan Stanek ended up pitching well or Phil Maton pitching well for a while. But I want bullpen help. I would love a bat. I just don't think the right guys are out there.
You don't think that David Stearns is playing coy a little bit? Like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We have a bar set, and we're not going to really exceed that bar. Or if a player doesn't exceed that bar, we're not going to trade it. I mean, they have so many prospects that have been building up, and it's like you said, they were in the NLCS last year. The next place to go was the World Series. How do you get there? Do you think this team right now, the way it is, with a couple extra relief pitchers, are making the World Series?
Who's the guy? I hate to bring it back to the same thing, but you're right. They got a loaded system. They're really close. They got a chance to win the World Series. Who's the player you're even talking about? The first guy you brought up, I've heard is not available in Brent Rooker. So give me someone else. Like, is it Suarez? Is that the guy?
If it's Suarez, I'll take Suarez, dude. He's a DH, like you said, perfect DH. That's actually something that the Mets have needed since they created the DH in the NL.
They've got nothing out of DH. It's actually remarkable.
Come on.
Well, we got a week. We got a week to find out.
I would take him and Zach Allen in the same trade and get Beeks. I've heard that rumor that there was an offer. We saw the Ricky Ricardo rumor. It was Merrill Kelly, Beeks, and Eugenio Suarez for a couple guys that weren't Spencer Jones or Lombard. Guess what? I would give you Brett Beatty, Acuna, Luis Angel Acuna, and Ronnie Mauricio. Get me those three guys.
Just to clarify, it wasn't a Ricky Ricardo rumor. Ricky Ricardo heard it from Pete Caldera. So I guess it was a Pete Caldera rumor if we're being specific. Well, it'll be a lot of fun. July 31st, the old official trade deadline day, and we'll see what this team does. Mets have an off day on July 31st, so we will we'll have a Rico and not have to worry about a game. But the Mets are back in action. They take on the San Francisco Giants out in California, and we'll be Ricoing as the Mets go west. And Ricoing when they make a trade. We'll try to do instant reactions, assuming trades do go down as soon after as we possibly can. Any thoughts, comments, you can email us to ricob@gmail.com, to ricob@gmail.com. Thank you very much for downloading and listening to episode 18 of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.